Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Creative Cranium. Thanks for tuning in. I got some great guests tonight. I can't wait to talk to them. Please welcome Caleb Thusat and Laurie Calcaterra.
What's up? How's it going, guys?
Good to see you. And I see Pop's there too, but I'm not sure he's most likely backstage.
I just popped in to be moral support in the backstage in case you get kicked off or something. I'm not trying to be part of the show. I'm out of here.
Well, I'm going to be asking you some questions, man. Ask you some questions.
Hi,
Hey,
Bob.
guys, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. We got a special Friday night edition. And what we're trying to do is to learn a little bit about the creators that are involved in some of these ongoing Kickstarter campaigns. Got some great books to talk about. Got some great campaigns to talk about. I'm going to start off with Caleb. One of the things that we like to learn about on the show is a little bit about what's making you tick, right? To learn a little bit about Caleb. Of course, your book sounds amazing, but we want to know a little bit about you. In this case, what kind of things inspire you? Our theme is going to be the inspirations, right? So I'm going to start with the one thing. I listen to a lot of music when I'm writing. I find music very inspiring. I'll start out with a musical question. Caleb, do you listen to music while you write or create?
Well, as you can see, I have a couple records back here. So
What do you got back there? What's back here?
Just a couple.
Just tons of stuff. There's like over 500 records back there. So you name
nice.
it. I'm a huge music fan. There's always something playing. I like a lot of indie music, and I listen to a lot of old, British rock and stuff too. So Kinks and Who and Beatles and all that good stuff. But
yeah, dig it.
I always throw something on that kind of puts me in the right mood for the mindset that I'm writing. So
yeah, sure.
Do
you have it like blasting or just like a little bit of subtle?
Oh no, not blasting.
Gotcha.
Just usually something atmospheric that doesn't get too distracting for me.
Little flavor to get the engine running. Laurie, how about you? Do you listen to music while you're creating?
Absolutely. I I like to have my headphones in so I can't hear anything else. Which is great because I have kids and we usually have a dog running around and right. There's always chaos in the house. So I prefer to just put the headphones in and it kind of like turns that sensory down. But I want to make sure I'm always listening to music with no words. So purely instrumental. So I'm not taken out of the moment of what's happening. So almost like a movie soundtrack, right? So
Sure.
I can see it happening, playing out in my head as the music goes, and it's inspiring that way.
Sure. I'm kind of that way too. You mentioned earlier about playing D&D, right? When we play D&D too, my son and I, and when we have the games going, when the music's playing, if it's a lot of lyrics, it's difficult to concentrate on the game. So we switch to you can download these. They're the themes from like Lord of the Rings and stuff. They're like epic D&D themes. That's what we listen to. Of course, that's for D&D. I love to tell anybody that'll listen, I'm a metalhead. That's what I listen to get me revved up when I first start writing. And I lean pretty heavily. I tend to almost always start with Black Sabbath.
Yes.
Why that is? Yeah. Why that is, I don't know.
I lean towards 9 Inch Nails.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Trent Reznor does great, just purely instrumental. And of course, I write a lot of horror and I write a lot of apocalypse. So it's a lot of intense moments. So it works really well.
Totally agree. I'm the same way. So, hey, let's jump back to Caleb. I like the music angle. So do you have any musical kind of heroes, like somebody maybe their lyrics spoke to you or you really like their guitar playing? Do you have any musical heroes? And if who?
I would say creatively, probably David Bowie's my biggest.
Sure. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Just he's so versatile and he's a chameleon and there's so much to delve into with his different styles and over his career, and I feel like that is kind of reflective of what I do with creating. I'm not really like the kind of person that stays in one place. I'm always kind of changing genres and having to adapt to that. I think that's a huge part of why I create is that I go for what inspires me at the moment, and I think that's kind of how he wrote his music too. So that's probably one of my biggest influences musically.
Yeah. Good answer. Laurie, how about you? Do you have some musical heroes? And if so, who are they?
Not really. I like the guys who can like Caleb kind of do it all. And I lean more towards, like I said, 9 Inch Nails. So like Trent Reznor can do so much. And I like Billy Corgan as well, where they write not only like it was like the 90s, the grunge era, more industrial music, but they also do movie soundtracks. Both of them.
For sure. Yeah.
It's amazing. If you look up some of the movies that Trent Reznor has done the music on, it's amazing. And it's life-changing. So it's like I like that kind of inspiration where it's like you can do a little bit of everything. I think is cool.
Nice.
I was a huge fan of Danny Elfman, who's a soundtrack writer, and he does all the great soundtracks, right? And, we always try to write theme songs with our Kickstarter campaigns, and that is always one of the instructions. And by the way, I got to give him a shout out because I'm making it seem like I do all this. I have a fantastic songwriting partner. His name is Sterling Jackson, and you see he's the name that's tagged in all the posts, but he never interacts with anything because he doesn't use Facebook. But he's a Class A songwriter, and he has a recording studio and stuff. And
that's a total skill unto itself, being able to compose music. To me,
well, I like it because it's something I can deliver to the digital backers with relative ease and no cost. So it's like a downloadable song, and that's also a service we offer, is that we'll write the songs if somebody wants to write their own theme song. And what we do is you can even write the elements of your story into the song. Like if you got some familiarity with our songs, there's a naval song, there's an Asian song, and they all have the elements. Like the most recent one was the Greek mythology one, and it had, when I say the instruments, these are what they call digital plugins, right? There's nobody actually holding a lyre, but it sounds like the instruments of the time period. And then it starts out, it's a little formula we use, which is starts out with the instruments of the time period, then goes into like an epic, like a John Williams version, and then it ends with like a metal rendition. And it's the same melody through each, it carries through, much like a TV theme song, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and we got over 6 Kickstarters, that's 10 songs written.
Wow.
Sweet.
Yeah, so
that's a accomplishment.
We talked about, it's not as closely associated with the current book because this is the cryptid book and we didn't make the new song yet. It's a stretch goal, but the other book has a bunch of issues, so there's like a body of music that goes with it. So we are talking about if you can, which I haven't got to this kind of level, but Matt Knowles, right? Caleb, Matt.
Oh yeah.
He released a vinyl a couple of years ago on one of his Kickstarters, and he said, well, it was a lot of headaches, so just be ready to. And plus, you've got to raise 10, 20 grand. So
is that all?
It's a good amount. Yeah, it's a big number. And again,
I might have to bug you about that for when I do the Neverland trade and get you to do some sort of.
Oh boy, I'd love to do it. And I tell you what, it's fun too. I'm going to offer the service to other creators primarily. So it's a thing like where we sort of jam, like we call up on the video and we hum the stuff back and forth, and he'll be playing like, what about this on the guitar? Like you'd be in it, if you know what I'm saying.
Nice.
You'll be in the band.
Want to do this. I will bust out my electric cello. Let's
jam. I love
Western music and come up with a theme song. That would be so fun.
All right, great inspirations. Let's talk about writers a little bit. Caleb, I'll start with you. When you first started reading, and probably started writing right away soon after that, right? Who were some of the writers that inspired you? Do you have some favorites that would stick with you? First of all, big names too, but if it's a little name that maybe we don't know, we would go and check it out.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I didn't really get into comics until I was in my 20s because I grew up in a town that was just, we didn't have a bookstore even. We didn't have comic book shops or anything. So I got into it after having gotten into X-Men through the cartoons and all that stuff. But so really my real inspiration didn't come until I read The Watchmen and I kind of saw what else comics could be. And I was working in film primarily in Chicago, and I had all these ideas that I wanted to kind of bring to life, but making independent film is a hell of a lot more expensive and more of an orchestration than anything to do with a comic book. So once I saw like what these people were doing with comic books, I was kind of inspired to go ahead and take these ideas and build them that way. So I would say Alan Moore was a huge influence. And then I started going into like Neil Gaiman and reading Sandman and all of this stuff that's very deep and entertaining at the same time, but has a lot of subtext and a lot more to it than just heroes with capes, and that kind of just opened unlocked this new world of creating to me, and I dove full in. I went to a comic convention, and I was like, it was my first Comic-Con, like when I was probably like 24, I think, or something like that. And I was watching people talking about creating, and I was like, I'm going to go home and write some comics. And I wrote like 3-issue ones in like a week of different ideas. And I just started from there. And it's been like snowballing ever since then. But I really have to attribute most of it to kind of seeing what Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman did with comics. You know, it's just kind of amazing to see that even the Sandman series was as successful as it was, because man, that's a deep.
If you would have made it today, it probably wouldn't have been successful. I always say, because it is so deep, and it's kind of dense reading too. It's not necessarily compared to. And I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but compared to what's kind of a manga generation, right, where there's not necessarily too much text on the page, you're going to read Sandman. You got to buckle your seatbelt. You're in for some reading. Matter of fact, I got for my birthday, I've got the omnibus. It's like this leather. It's this huge, it looks like it's.
I have like the box set of trades, which is awesome. But
yeah, it's beautiful.
That omnibus is on my wish list on Amazon.
I wouldn't have bought it for myself. I'm always too guilty because it was like $80 or something. My mom got it for me for my birthday, which what a great shout out to Mom. That's a cool mom right there. Right?
Thanks, Mom.
So Laurie, how about you? We're talking about I'm sorry, Caleb, you want to?
I was going to say, and that being said, with all that stuff, like as deep as all that stuff goes, I try to kind of skirt the line, because I know that in the generation that we're kind of catering to now is not necessarily going to go out and read all of the Sandman, but so I try to kind of skirt the line, and I put a lot of subtext in these things, but it's still just a great fun story at the same time. So I try to keep it kind of, Spielberg meets Kubrick, not strictly Stanley Kubrick. So.
right.
Kubrick is what you're saying is watch.
You keep the story moving along. You keep the story moving along.
Exactly.
Right.
Gotcha. And viewers, hey, if you happen to be checking this out, we're talking about The Neverland by Caleb Thusat. That's on Kickstarter right now. Call to action. Go over right now and purchase it. This is I'm actually one of the backers. I think I have 1 and 2. I forget exactly, but it's a terrific series. And man, hope you get all the support. Let's get all the support we can get.
Yeah.
It'll get there.
Yeah, we'll jump over to Laurie. Laurie, how about you for your writing influences? Let me see. I'll get your campaign up too. Tell us a little bit about who your inspirations are. And let's start when you were young, right? When you first started reading, who was somebody that inspired you in their writing?
Well, I mean, I started reading Stephen King pretty early, like in high school.
Nice.
So obviously The Dark Tower is a big influence. But really all of his horror, even some that's not his horror, was really influential. Like The Green Mile, the books that were super thin, it was like little novellas. They were, a quick read, but so in depth and made you feel, you know what I mean? So that I would read some Dean Koontz, and then I, just like Caleb, I found The Watchmen in my 20s. And then it was like, ooh, look at this, look at this amazing story with all these complicated heroes with issues. And that made us love them so much more. And then found like Image Comics. So I love Robert Kirkman's writing, Walking Dead, Invincible, Oblivion Song.
Did you like Oblivion Song?
I loved Oblivion Song.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good too. I was surprised it didn't really get.
I know. It was a great concept. And when you find out, like, can I spoil it?
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right. So big spoiler, the main character is the one that caused the problem. So you're following this guy who you think is the protagonist, but he's really the antagonist, and he just won't own up to it until someone finally calls him out. So it's interesting, East of West, huge influence there. But a lot of Image Comics, really, because they're so complicated. And I love their writing style between, all of their creator-owned, products. It's different to me than reading like Marvel. It just didn't. Superheroes were never really my thing. I mean, I would read Batman, but the darker ones, like The Killing Joke was the kind of the ones that I was drawn to. So that horror, that darkness, that's kind of where I went, for inspiration.
Well, and Laurie, you make a good point, which is that, first of all, we got 3 writers in the room, right? None of us are artists.
Correct.
Yep.
So all of us gravitated to comics, and we all did it without using superheroes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't have any
Absolutely.
hero.
No.
Well, I mean, I got the Robot Super Team book, which is sort of heroish, but that's not. I mean, that
Well,
one's kind of fallen by the wayside, even. You know what I mean?
I have superhero cats, but that's for my son, and
Right.
Gotcha.
I had to write something for my kids, so.
Sure. Well, yeah, and Laurie, that's a
right.
great answer, because I can, I get it on the influence of the Dark Tower. I love the Dark Tower, and I was
Yeah.
also a huge fan of. You mentioned Peter Straub, right?
Peter Straub?
Yeah. Did you mention him just now?
Mm-mm.
Oh, he's the guy who worked with Stephen King on The Talisman, I think it was.
Oh, okay. I
don't
said
know
the
if you're-
Green Mile.
Oh, the Green Mile. Gotcha.
Green Mile.
Okay, I got that mixed up. But that's another one. It was Stephen King and Peter Straub. Again, backers. If I got that wrong, shout out in the comments. I might have it a little wrong. But they collaborated on a book, and it's got like this sort of fantasy. It's sort of their version of. It's very much like the Man in Black from
Okay.
The Dark Tower, and it's kind of like an alternate universe they can go to, and there's a good queen and an evil queen, and it's got a lot of lore, which we all love lore, right?
Right.
So in my case, the writing influence, I was turned on pretty young to Lord of the Rings, and I always loved Tolkien. I was always turned on to comics pretty young, and the thing that I liked about it, and I love to tell this part, is that when you read a Marvel comic, and for me, I'm a little older than you guys. This would have been in the late 70s, probably. Is when I was reading them, maybe early 70s. The books were all sort of connected, and what I mean by that is, even if the story wasn't necessarily tied together, there was a good chance that you'd see Daredevil come swinging through, or Spider-Man was on his way to go fight the Kingpin. It's like they all knew each other, and they kind of like popped up in each other's books, and that's what kind of got me obsessed with lore. DC Comics did that too, but they didn't do it to the same success level that Marvel did, in one man's opinion. And then, of course, as I got a little older, I always want to recommend one that maybe people don't know as much, but I'm a Raymond Carver fan. He's a short story writer. And then, of course, when I got into comics, I was into Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, and Grant Morrison is my unholy trinity. Probably not too different from
I like
you guys.
it.
And I do want to ask, because you guys gave great answers on the inspirational writers, okay? But what I want to know now is if you feel that they influenced your work. And what I mean by that, there's basically 2 ways. Like, I'll start with Caleb. When you're writing your script, do you try to emulate Alan Moore in any way, or to emulate the story, or to maybe structure it a certain way, or do you just let it flow? How do you do it?
I don't really consciously think about like their style or anything, but I do feel like maybe there's a voice there in the back of my head, kind of making me lean a certain way. So I'm trying to always give it something more than what's on the surface. Because I've tried to write stories where I'm just writing something fun and action packed, and it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel finished. So I always have to go back and add something that's underneath it all, that's like either saying something about society, or talking about just social issues, or what's going on in the world in a given time. But I went to college and studied popular culture, as odd as that
That's
sounds.
pretty wild. Where'd you go to school? Can we ask you, Caleb? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah, I went to Bowling Green in Ohio, and it's the only college that actually lets you major in a popular culture study, which you're essentially studying like the inspirations and
pretty handy tool if you're going to be a writer.
Things. Yeah, like whether it was conscious or not that I was planning on using this to write comic books, I don't know, but I did want to be a writer even then. I wanted to write movies, so I suppose it all ties in. But so I was, looking at films and books and analyzing why they were written at the times that they were. So to me, it's always like why I love Batman is because every time it's written, it reflects something about the society, the way society is in the time that it's being written. And I love that can be adapted every generation for something new. So I kind of try to build, that's where these ideas come from. I kind of go with the flow of inspiration. Neverland came out of the pandemic, so I kind of wrote with that in my head. But after reading these people that have inspired me, I do think I always have that person kind of in the back of my head saying, you can keep it in this kind of related realm of things. Like, I guess when I wrote Nook, which is a World War II ghost story, I wrote that with like Guillermo del Toro's voice kind of in my head.
Yeah, sure. I get that, man. I've seen the art for that. I get that.
Yeah, it's not like I was trying to write a script for him to go ahead and develop into a movie, but like I definitely had that inspiration kind of pushing me forward to get that story written. And I think it's a healthy way to write, honestly. Like let whatever inspires you, let that get the words on the page, right? Because that's the battle, is getting it out there.
That's a good answer. How about Laurie? How about you? When you're at the very beginning and you're starting with a script, do you emulate any of these writers who inspired your works? Like, do you try and structure it like them? Anything like that?
I don't. First of all, Caleb, I think you and I are twins from another mother. Everything you just said about like how you interpret like Batman is talking about what's happening in culture. That's how I talk about horror, because that horror very much tells us what we're afraid of. You know, we could have a whole nother show about that.
I was gonna say, that's the funny thing about any creative field, though. If you're making a movie, whether you intend to do it or not, you're saying something about the world that you're living in.
And I'm with you where it's like, this is cool, but it'd be much cooler if we were saying something. You know what I mean? Where people could feel emotion behind it. And that's how people are going to empathize with the characters one way or another. But anyway, back to the question. I don't consciously structure, but I mean, overall, what I try to do is pay homage to some of the things that inspire me. Yeah. So yes, I love horror. I love action. I have an issue where I pay homage to Indiana Jones. Right. Cool. I got all these explosions. I got all these booby traps, and like they say funny stuff. His hat always comes back. Stuff like that, where you're gonna see things that remind you of that. But that's just that one issue. And I might have another issue where we pay homage to something else that I really like. You know what I mean? Whether it be like Walking Dead or a horror movie or whatever. But I don't consciously like structure my story after any one creator. I just kind of like pull from what I like from everybody and mash it all together, and it's its own thing.
Sure. I have I'll jump on this one last. I do frame the stories a little bit. And by the way, you know, when I say these words, don't hear that I copy them, because I don't mean it like
that's not the same.
But right, you know, you do try to emulate some of the greats that you've seen. And you know, if you had gone to see Van Halen and you saw Eddie Van Halen up on stage playing, when you left, you'd say, man, I want to try and do what that guy just did, you know, because he made it look so effortless and so beautiful. In my case, I definitely emulate, not as well as when they've done it, I should say, but I emulate Alan Moore a great deal. I emulate some of the Scott McCloud things. I'll give a quick visual example of what I mean by that. So in the case of like page making, you know, we talk a little bit about the use of 9-panel pages, right?
Yeah.
And not every artist likes them. Of course, it's primarily known from Watchmen. That's one of the big ones. Or we sometimes do a thing where it's a 12-panel page and then it's one big splash. So you end up with 13 panels and 2 pages. But now in a case like this, you can see you get a really smooth passage of time, and really the look of somebody, it's of course our character Cadence Malloy being pursued by the Men in Black. And what you have there on the page, it's a little bit of some what I call nonlinear dialogue, in the sense, this is the part where I say emulated Grant Morrison, because it's a little bit like Doom Patrol. Like every third panel is the radio crackling and coming in, which is the signal from the cryptids. The second, fourth, and fifth panel are the lyrics of the metal band, which you'll hear filtering through the radio. It's like a song that you'll be hearing. Cool. And all the panels on the left-hand side will be like them, get her, you know, like Chase. That's the only part that they're actually saying. So it's a little bit like sort of interpretive almost, right?
Yeah. It's very
And-
cinematic.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by, you know, it's if you were in a class and they were teaching you about Scott McCloud or some of these like the Watchmen, they would definitely make an example of a 9-panel page. And you know, not every artist loves them. And I will say this, and I'd like to know what you thought of it. When you start using them, you almost have to do it every page because it gives sort of a and you know, if you're going for symmetry, you sometimes have to keep going. But mine is not this is the only time that I use the 9-panel. But that's what I mean when I say emulate them a little bit. And you know, it's something that I've always been a fan of, that kind of storytelling. And I forget if I asked Laurie this before or not, but did we talk about Scott McCloud and his book Understanding Comics? And if we didn't, have either of you guys heard of that book?
No.
He used to write a book. He's relatively famous. He wrote a book called Zot. And a couple of years later, he wrote his book, Understanding Comics. And it's like one of the things that they give to students to teach them. It's that and the Eisner Art of Sequential Storytelling or whatever it's called. So hey, a recommendation. If you haven't seen Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, grab it because it'll talk about stuff like this.
Cool.
Hey, and of course, that's you know, every artist is different. Some guys love to jump into a challenge like this. Some don't too much. Some don't too much. You know what I mean? So, but my next question, I wanted to talk. We're all fans of artwork and stuff too. So we talked a little bit about the writers that influenced us. We're all very visual creatures, right? So my question would be for Caleb: what kind of artists have influenced your work? Who do you find to be inspirational? Was there one, you mentioned the X-Men and stuff when you were younger. What did you see that made you go, you know what, I want to make comics?
It's going to seem silly, but my first real introduction to comics was the original Ninja Turtles, like the Kevin Eastman, like
black and white
as shit, like not really intended for kids, but you know, I was into it because I loved Turtles on TV. So I was, but then you know, you're like horrified because it's completely different. But that was the moment where you're just like, wow, this is really cool. Like I hadn't that my first comic was really, I think, the first volume of the Ninja Turtles from the original series. So that crazy dark kind of not really mainstream art style that they used then, it was kind of sketchy, you know. I even my first book that I did, Alter Life, kind of, I would say, even kind of harkens back to that kind of style where it's almost watercolor meets like just something from somebody's sketchbook that they made a comic book out of. And I love non-traditional art and I love non-traditional panel work. And I let my artist Marcelo, who I've been working with for a while now, I think we work together so well because I write the words, but I kind of let him have free reign outside of like, I want, you know, there's certain pages where I'm going to be like, well, I want this and that and the other thing.
Yeah, can you expand on that a little bit? Given like how much free reign would you give? Give me an example.
So I'll structure, like, if there's something that has to happen, I'll structure it pretty fine-tuned on the page for him. But 9 times out of 10, I'll tell him, if you see it a better way than this, you're an artist and I'm a writer. So show me what is better. And he'll normally give me something that is like, okay, you're better than me. So I'll let him do it. But I love non-traditional. I'll actually show you in this book. I have handily laying here, like non-traditional paneling, like,
you know, I've seen that. That's the one I have. Is that cool. Neverland 1?
Yeah, so this, like,
yeah, that's awesome.
I had this idea of them going down into the big tree, right, where Peter Pan and Lost Boys live, but we definitely did like crazy non-traditional, and I love to have those spreads. I love to do something that's, I'm more modern artist. Well, I guess he's modern, but he's been around for a while. Jay Lee, if you're.
Oh yeah.
He did a lot of the Dark Tower adaptation. He did my favorite thing that he did, and it's the Ozymandias before Watchmen. If you look at that with the non-traditional paneling, it's astounding. It's like, it blew me out of the water, man. Like, I went and actually talked to him at a convention, and I was like praising him for that, and he told me that the publisher hated him because he was like, I was so late with those because I wanted to do it a certain way that they hated me. And so he remembers me when I email him every once in a while, and we had like an ongoing conversation. But he remembers me because I was talking to him about Ozymandias and like how it just was so cool and non-traditional. And
was that the one with Darwin? No, it's Jay Lee, and who's the writer?
I have it sitting right up here. I forget who honestly, that's the funny thing is I forget who the writer is because Jay Lee, but I can even show
I'm gonna guess.
you.
Ready? It's J. Michael Straczynski. See how close I got.
No, it's who is it? John Higgins and Len Wein.
Oh wow.
But but his style is just so unconventional, and he does like something that matches the tone of the book, and that's like Marcelo does the same thing for me, and I just love even if you look at his older stuff, like his superheroes, his stuff from like the 80s and 90s, like it's even that has some of that sprinkled in there, but you can tell that he got bored with the style that he did, and he just started doing his own thing. And he does mostly covers now, but probably because publishers don't want to wait for him to finish his pages.
Well,
he's a big influence on me doing the non-traditional panel work for sure.
Yeah, and just make a quick comment. I did back that book, and viewers, go over and check it out, man. That's the Neverland. It was a terrific artwork, great writing throughout it. And I like your cultural references and your variants and stuff like that you're doing for that project.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, speaking of homages, that's Never Ending Story, and got the Willow poster, and then the new ones sitting over here. Kroll.
Yes.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
Caleb, we just became best friends.
Well, and let's jump over to Laurie. So that we were talking about the unconventional panels.
He's stealing my thunder because we do all the same thing. I gotta take this background down so you people can see.
Gotcha.
You get to see my wonderful children's back dresser. I always put the background up because she's messy. But look, same thing. Like my artists love. Yeah. And I'm the same way. Like I write screenplay. And my artist he's able to read and fill in the blanks of what the world looks like. And I'm with you where it's like, I can see it in my head, but I could never tell him how to put it on the page. There's certain things that have to be in the story because they're plot essential. But then other than that, he has free reign. And he comes up with such cool stuff where it's like, where they're playing a game of poker and the poker cards are the panels. Awesome. You know what I mean? Or there's a fight scene and it's literally coming at you off the page, Yep.
Nice.
That's cool.
He does amazing
stuff. I've had artists that do just like, they want to do the exact thing that I put on the page.
Yes.
And 9 times out of 10, I get that back and I'm like,
right.
Not as good as
it's just not as exciting.
In my head. Like, maybe you shouldn't go for word for me. And just like, but that's about finding the right people. Like I've been very fortunate with a couple of the artists that I've worked with. So,
and I agree with the non-conventional art. Tim, if you pull up my Kickstarter, I want to show Caleb some of the covers that we've done for issue 3. There, I have some I usually do like 4 variants. So Marco DeFillo, my interior artist, will always do the A cover, and then I'll pick like 2 seasoned guys that are in comics, and then 2 people who are not from comics, and see what they produce. So I had a guy that was a graphic designer, one that is a high school teacher who teaches illustration and vector art, and then 2 guys, one who specializes in pinups, and you'll see which one that is, and then another guy who's actually a very seasoned cover artist, but he was like, I'm not going to be in comics forever. I'm trying to do something that's more like a gallery piece. And I gave him freedom to do whatever style he wanted. And he came up with something really interesting. So we're kind of pushing the boundaries of what a variant cover is and looks like. And
Nice.
yeah, actually scroll down to the part where it says variants because they're all down there. It's quite a bit ways. You'll see the header. There's Marco. There's Marta. There's some updates. Keep going. Not suitable for work cover. Keep going. Keep going. Sorry. Okay, go back. This one. Okay. So this is the guy that does vector art.
Nice.
Like really not traditional for a cover at all, but pops off the page. This guy was the graphic designer, cool. Right? Mm-hmm. And it looks very cinematic, like a movie poster.
Yeah, it's cool for like an ad campaign.
Yeah. And then
that reminds me of something up Caleb's alley.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, it's nice.
And then this is the guy that's the seasoned artist, but wanted to try something different. Look how beautiful that turned out.
It came out great.
Nice.
And then, of course, my pinup.
Little smiley faces.
Yep.
Path of the Pale Rider.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great, man. And
I love pushing the line of what is a cover art. You know what I mean?
I'll show an unconventional page.
Let's see.
We were talking about some of the different panel work, and this is a good example here in the sense that, I never would have said there's obviously some symmetry between, and I wrote that in between her, hey, I think I see them, and then being spotted by the men in black, right? But he has like sort of being viewed through these symmetrical windows. Like he came up with that on his own. That's Erwin Arosa.
That's cool.
And,
at that moment where they're like, hey kid, have you seen her? And he's like, she's right over there. It's like,
yeah,
oh,
no. Right. Put another way, I could leave the script off and you can still tell what happened.
Exactly. That's how you know you have a good artist. You can read, just look at the images and follow the story exactly.
Well, and just real quick, I forgot to say as we went around. So that was Path of the Pale Rider. If you're watching, go over right now and buy it. I got to have a call to action for each one of us because hey, at the end of the day, it's great that we have the viewers able to learn a little bit about us. But really, the greatest way to support your creative friends is to buy one of their products. If you can't do that, then we also can likely survive on likes and shares. But buy one of our books. We'll be best friends forever.
Right. I mean, that's really where we need your help is, financially getting our projects brought to life because they are a labor of love. And we as indie comic creators don't make money off of these. A lot of times we're in the red, paying out of pocket for those little extras to make sure the product turns out good. So
yeah, for real. So, and Caleb, how about when you launch your Kickstarter campaigns? I guess let's rewind to even before the campaign. When you're doing your writing and you're just kind of brainstorming your ideas, when do you know, hey, I got something here? When is it, hey, this is a great idea. I'm really doing something.
Honestly, like I'll write up an arc that's like an over series arc first that gives me like the bullet points. And at first it's like, well, this could go somewhere, this could be good, but not until really I get that first issue completely finished will I know if it's compelling enough to like keep going. So I try to have enough bullet points in there that it's going to be like, when I did Neverland, I wrote it as a 5-issue story arc. So, the climactic moment is this issue that's on Kickstarter now. It's like, this is the big climactic moment that's going to lead on to where Percy, the main character, ends up. But, once I wrote that first issue, I would know, well, like if I'm feeling some good emotion from these characters and I hand this script over to my wife or let someone else read it and they come back to me and they're like, yes, this is something that I would want to read more of, then I feel like only then really do I have something. But I don't know, like maybe with this one in particular, having like been watching my son grow up in the pandemic, like I felt like there was a story that could be really relatable and be told with these with this world. And so I felt kind of at the get-go, like when I had that moment of clarity of concept, that I was like, there's something here that could be something new, like taking those old 80s fantasy movies and putting a new story like that out for a new generation. So there's not a lot of that out there, so I just felt like immediately with this one I kind of felt like there was something that had to be told.
Yeah. And I like your 80s aesthetic, Caleb.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I think that there's something about and I'm going to come back to this in the next round of questions because I want to show you the musical influence, but there's something about the 80s movies and the music. There's something about those references that are very strong, even to this current generation, which I don't know why that is, but it seems to be very true. So Laurie, how about you? I do want to know this. So we talk about, hey, you got your brainstorm idea, right? You came up with this and it's going to be X and it's going to be the greatest new project. How do you know when you've got something? Do you jot off the first couple of pages? Is it an arc? How much of it do you finish? At what point do you go, wow, this is it. This is my new project.
I'm the same as Caleb. I beta test it out. I'm like, read this and tell me what you think, right? And and at first you're like, it's crap. No one's going to like it. You have that whole imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then people start giving you feedback like, hey, this is really good. Like, what are you going to do with this? What is it? Is it a movie? Is it a game? Is it what is it? So they're trying to find a vehicle in which they can consume the media. And that's kind of when I know I have something, is when people are like, what happens in the next one, Laurie? And it's funny. I just want to talk about, you're freaking me out, Caleb, because you're talking about like the pandemic and how it affected your writing. Mine was a little different. I wrote mine before the pandemic, but then watched some of the stuff that I wrote happen in 2020, which was really bizarre. So it kind of came into its own right after we went through the pandemic and like had riots and had unrest. And it's like the stuff that happens in the comic will have much more impact on people since we've lived through that than when I wrote it,
That's how you know you wrote something good, because I had that same moment when I wrote that World War II story, and I was writing something that was essentially about a meditation on repeating history, and we were doomed to be repeated over and over again. And that was right before the big mess of the country, essentially.
And that's kind of where I'm going with my story too, is that we've had riots before. I've based it off of what really happens, when people are upset and we take to the streets. And I've based it off of how far governments can go and take rights away from people. It's all stuff that we've experienced, but I just created a new vehicle to show it to people. But then of course in 2020 things kind of went downhill. So it's very much instead of like distant past history where we read about it in books, it's now like stuff that we've lived through in the last 3 years. So it has much more of an impact. I did want to show you something, Tim, in my book, issue number 2, and I'm with you on that musical the music aspect. I actually have 2 musical Easter eggs in my story.
Oh, sweet. See, I would love stuff like this, Laurie. You're preaching to the right customer. See, viewers, if you're this type of person, you got to check this out. Hold it up a little closer, Laurie.
I got to take down the stupid virtual background because
hold it, and let me make you bigger on the screen. One sec.
So I did 2 things. I wrote music.
Oh yeah.
Into there, and yes, I did really hand transcribe that. And if you can't read music, you can scan the QR code and find out what music is playing.
Oh,
so you can still get to the music even if you can't read music. And then I reference a song. I don't give any much more than a couple words, but this guy is singing a song in his car. And if you know which song it is, I hate that song with a passion. So I immediately smashed that man with the 18-wheeler on the road because after that song.
Nice.
So anytime someone sings that song in my story, you best believe we're going to smash him with something giant and wipe him across the road.
Well, that is a terrific Easter egg, and I really dig things like that. If you're watching from home, that's Path of the Pale Rider. Definitely check that one out. Let's take a second and answer Mike's question. I'll go first on this one. I am probably the worst example for a script writer. I typically come up with mine in the shower. I start with the ending first, Kind of do what Caleb says. I look for the emotional component, and then I write it backwards to show how they got to the emotional component. But I don't necessarily do the 3 arc thing, because sometimes it can be 4, or I'm uneven with that. And to make matters even worse, I sometimes edit it one more time after the letterer had it, because, when you're a writer, excuse me, let me refer to myself so it doesn't sound like I'm insulting. I often have a shortcoming where I think my words just sound so terrific, I want to plaster them all over this page. But then when you see how many it is and it's covering up the artwork, you go, man, I could have got away with less wording than this. So I take some of it off. And especially because I don't like covering the beautiful artwork,
Yep.
And, phrased another way, most of the exposition should be at the beginning, at the end. Probably you want to try and limit the words that are covering the artwork. That's one man's opinion. So I probably have for mine, when you say 3 revisions, I bet you I have probably 6 revisions total. How about you, Caleb? How many revisions you do?
Well, I do my stuff a little different. I do try to do the 3 arc to an extent. I still have film brain when I'm writing, so
Sure.
I write with the same kind of structure. I've gotten better with episodic because I'm basically having to do Kickstarters one by one with the issues. I had to train myself to write that way. I probably edit at least twice before I send it to my artist, and then I'll go, and I actually, one other thing I did during the pandemic is I taught myself to letter. And so basically,
oh, you letter it, Caleb? I don't think I knew that.
So yeah, so Neverland is lettered by me. A lot of the shorts that I do now, I do the lettering of. But the reason I did it is because I found myself going back to Marcelo, who was doing the lettering on top of the artwork, and I was like asking him to remove stuff, asking him to alter stuff, and I was like, it makes a hell of a lot more sense if I learn how to do this and I can just edit it and do it the way that I want it to be done, and then I have Marcelo look at it again with his artistic eye and tell me, if I fudge something up. But for the most part, we're in sync with all that stuff. But it's honestly, as a writer, I will say, if you're a writer in comics and you don't know how to letter, like, it's an easy skill. All you need is an iPad and an Apple Pen, and you can do it. Like, I bought a $10 program and I do it, and it's like so easy. And honestly, like, there's people that can do it better than me probably, but I think I'm getting better as it goes. And you can look at examples of all this. You just pick up a comic book and see how it's done. You know what I mean? So there's references everywhere you look.
I use a program called Comic Life. You ever hear of it? Can make comic pages.
No.
Can make a page with it. But I still I letter them to sort of see what it looks like, but then I still send them to a letter.
Yeah, but it's a great way to just have that final, like, I can go through, and then if there's something that is messed up or needs changed for the printer, I don't have to be like calling up some guy that's got 20 other things he's doing and ask him to change something on a page. So.
Right. Sure.
And get it back 3 days later when I want it, like, now. So.
I got one more musical thing I wanted to tell you. I forgot to mention this when we went around the room. Yeah, I wanted to. This one. I thought I better explain what it is, right? So I'm a huge fan of 80s heavy metal, and it seems that a lot of people are, but I know that's some years ago, so I'll just quick remind you, there used to be a whole trend of bands, and it was bands like Motley Crue, AC/DC, Kiss. They were sort of like shocking, big hair, outrageous, always trashing hotel rooms, this kind of thing. Music used to be much different than it is now. Anyway, the point is that I wanted to have the radio as like a central component of the story, and occasionally the lyrics filter through and enter the panels, and it's sort of like an interconnected kind of thing. But what we learned was that, like, we were going to have like Get Your Motor Running, like, Born to Be Wild. But even to have a snippet of it, it's too well known of a project, you potentially have a copyright violation. You have to apply for the use of that. And then we said, well, you know what? We like the concept of having the lyrics, and we like the concept of an edgy rock and roll band. And by the way, I'm a musician, so I come by it honestly. it doesn't take too much other than me trying to remember what I did back in those days, because I was a musician in those days. So what we did is we created our own rock band and wrote the lyrics for their song. And they're not actually in the book, but when she has her radio playing and the lyrics that are coming out, it is their song. That's Turn Back Dorothy. Yeah, a band from Syracuse, New York, shock rockers. And the hit song is called Protectors of the Silver Orb. And they're just getting ready to launch on this tour. And one of the stretch goals was, if we hit it, it was 2,400 something. It would be a bio. The band bio is now in the back of the book, and it tells you about like the guy lost a couple fingers in a hunting accident, and he can still play anyway. It's like rock trivia, right? Which is, if you like those kind of VH1 specials or the old MTV things, you'll probably like
music.
It. And it's a little bit. Either you guys familiar with Spinal Tap by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I'm never sure, right? Like some of these are older properties, of course.
Yeah.
But like if you like the sort of rockumentary type thing, you're gonna love Turn Back Dorothy, because they're like super shocking and constantly in trouble. One of the concerts had a riot, stuff like that. So of course that's the band that our character likes. She just thinks it's awesome, and that's who she listens to.
That's hilarious.
Nice.
There's a writer right now named Matt Kund, Kund, and he
I
has
know Matt,
Kickstarter right
Metal
now.
Eagle.
Yeah, I forget. It's like Eagles of
It's
Metal.
Metal Eagle. Metal
Eagles. And it's about this rock band that they use, like the CIA uses for espionage. Hilarious. I backed that one. I want to read that.
Yeah, he did something so cool too that I thought. He
hilarious.
has he's got the logo, and it's the Guns N' Roses logo.
Yeah.
And the homages, I guess it's his character's heads on the Guns N' Roses logo, which is one of those we almost did to ours, but when I saw that, I stopped.
Just kidding.
I've seen it a few times at this point. Yeah. That's why
quality.
I picked Kroll, because who does a Kroll homage cover?
Nobody
does Kroll.
Yeah, nobody does.
That movie. Like we all have this like weird spot in our heart for it, but like the music was terrible. Like the plot was okay. I think it kind of scarred me as a child. Like
it's
the
all
spider
about the
scene,
special effects.
guy getting smashed by the door, like
the spider scene. Oh god,
spider, and then like the Cyclops getting smashed in the door. I was just like, no, so heart-wrenching.
It's so weird. I just love it because it's so weird, and it's like what I do, where it's like a mashup of every kind of different thing, and it somehow made a story, and Liam Neeson appears in it, and
I get you,
awesome.
man. I just smash different things together. I just, I smash westerns and horror and conspiracy theories and political unrest, and you got yours.
I got my attention.
Same thing.
I'm telling you, we're like new best friends. I think
that's what I'm saying. Like I feel like we share the same brain.
Yeah, bringing people together, man. And I tell you, this is one of these funny things too, Caleb, because we talked about this a couple of months ago, and I never saw any scenario where I'd be podcasting, let alone 2 live ones a week and a recorded one.
Right?
It's like what the heck's happening?
Yeah.
But I would want to ask this question, and we could probably go a little over time. We usually go to right about an hour, but I do want to ask this question. So, hey, multi-talented people in here, and Laurie knows this one because I think I might have asked her this once before. But Caleb, out of all the things you could do, hey, you're a movie guy. Why comics?
It just seemed to be the right thing. Honestly, I had no idea I wanted to write comics until I went to a comic book convention and saw people talking about creating comics, and kind of put that up against making films. And I was like, hell, this looks a hell of a lot easier than making an independent film. I get to work with 2 people, to maybe a handful of people, versus like 100 people. And I was producing independent film back then, and I was just like dealing with all those egos. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I was like, how can I still create awesome stories without all of the mess? And granted, I got into a whole other mess of self-publishing, but I didn't know what I was getting into. So, but I would just say the timing was right. I was working a 9-to-5 job back then, and I hated. And the day my first Kickstarter funded, that job let me go. like the same day. Like I couldn't even, it's a story, I couldn't even make that story up. So I was, at that moment, I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm making comic books because it just makes sense. The world has told me that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
Sure. That's a good story, buddy.
It's like, I can't even have one day to celebrate. God damn it.
Laurie, how about you? And I know we spoke about this briefly before, because you're video editor, graphic, you got all these skills. Why comics?
Coming from production and writing for production and having a giant idea that would cost millions, right? I don't have a Netflix budget. And I don't know how to pitch to Netflix. So that very quickly came off the table. But then it became like, okay, how do we tell our story? And being that we were already reading comics, it just made sense, because you can get an artist to show all the crazy stuff that like CGI would have to do, or, you know, millions of dollars of budget would have to do. But Marco DeFillo can draw all those things. He's so talented. So, it made sense to us to do that. So I had to take my script for my full-length movie and break it up into issues. And I think that was the hardest part. But once that was done, it was like, okay, this works great. Like, it's basically, to me, like it would be a Netflix series. That's how my issues are broken up. You know what I mean? So we have like a first season, a second season, a third season with like 12 to 13 issues in each one. But it actually took my husband reading the script to figure that out, because I was so stuck. I would have had such tunnel vision. Like, this is a movie script. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was like, this is a comic book. And I was like, you're absolutely right. Like, it took him reading it for me to like figure out what we needed to do. Because again, you get so stuck on an idea. Sometimes you need the outside person to be like, no, you're thinking about this the wrong way. Think about it this way.
Well, it's a great way to stick to the visual medium, right?
Right.
Because that's the same background that I have, is working with film. It's like you still want to work visually. You don't want to just write words. You want something
right. I needed some visual,
artistic.
Well, and
you still want to collaborate, you know.
Right.
So
it's
collaboration
like,
without the mess, right?
There's a little bit of an element. I love telling people the act of making comic books is not too dissimilar from being in a band. And what I mean by that, you know, you got your lead guitarist, you got your bassist, you got your drummer, you got your singer. Hey, you all get together. When the curtain goes up, it's time to play. It's time to make the show, right? And the comics are the same way. And I think that once you get your team lined up, there's no limits to what you can do. And in my case, I was a short story writer for a number of years, really never got any traction as a short story writer. But when I started making comics, it felt right. And I mentioned Scott McCloud earlier. That's Understanding Comics. If you haven't checked out that book, anybody who's viewing, man, you'll be thanking me, saying, wow, thanks for telling me that, Tim, because it is a life-changing book about how to make comics. And trust me, I'm telling the truth. But he says, when you make a page, it's not like another thing. It's not like when you make a sculpture. It's not like when you write a song. When you're a comic maker, you're a page maker, and it's a craft. It's a different way of telling a story. And once you sort of jump in the water, once the water gets you, it's like you sort of keep going. And that's why it's true of all of us in this room. We've gone through multiple issues now without really, we don't even need a publisher anymore. It's like you start the engine and the darn thing leaves the station, you know? We're just kind of steering it at this point, and the books keep coming out.
Yep.
So in particular, in particular, I like both what you are doing, both Caleb and Laurie. I think that your projects have a lot of, I like things that have like multi-layers, like a lot of creative experiences to them. And that can take a lot of forms. It can be different types of art or music or whatever. But both you guys have a lot of Easter eggs and references, and you can kind of, it's something you can sink your teeth into, if you know what I mean.
We should talk, because I do short films with my comic.
Nice.
So every issue that I release, I have like a little short film that goes with it, where we explore more of the world, stuff that maybe my character won't see in his journey. So we actually expand our universe, and I make it fan interactive, so the fans can see themselves on the screen.
That is cool.
Have a lot of fun.
That is cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and as we get ready to wrap up the show here, let's go around the room one more time, and we're going to do a quick pitch for some of the, actually, I think Caleb is next. We'll do the Neverland. Tell us one more time about the Neverland and who will enjoy this book?
So The Neverland is a story that came out of the pandemic. I watched my son growing up, kind of growing up too early, dealing with all the stuff. And we was really into Peter Pan at the time for some reason. So we read the original novel, and it kind of blew me away because I probably shouldn't have read it to him because it was much darker than I thought it was. But it also gave me this great thought that there's a story to be told now about kids losing their youth too soon. And so I wrote a story about a boy during the pandemic, escapes to Neverland, and he finds that the magic is all lost from the island. And he has to basically go on this epic quest to figure out what happened to Peter Pan and how to bring the magic back. And so you get to see all of this cool stuff that happened between the original novel of Peter Pan and the pandemic of 2020. This is issue 3. It's the big climactic arc that's going to lead to the ending of craziness. And it's all kind of inspired by movies like The Neverending Story, Willow, Labyrinth. Things
all the good ones. You got all the good ones in there,
80s.
buddy.
Things that,
fantastic.
When I was
journeys.
a kid, I loved all those movies, and then when I was in my 20s, I watched them again, and I was like, "Holy crap!" There was a lot more going on with these stories than you really realize when you're a kid. So, and I feel like there's something lost in modern storytelling for kids. So I kind of took it upon myself to write this new fantasy story for kids that's going to give them those moments again where it's dark, but it's not too dark. It's got that Hook meets Neverland where it meets the Neverending Story, where it's like it feels like it might be, some of this stuff might be too dark for children, but it's really not. Like they can understand these things, and then when they get older, they're going to appreciate it that much more. And so I try to write books that you're not just going to want to read once and put away forever. You're going to want to come back to it. It's going to call you back again. So
His books have been grim forever, so don't worry. Right?
Yeah.
This is not my fun Super Cat series. This is much different. So.
I have the first one, or maybe even I might even have 1 and 2. I'll have to look, but just a quick comment. I think the art is terrific. I think that's a great project. That's from Caleb Thusat. That's The Neverland. It's on Kickstarter right now. Call to action. Drop what you're doing. Go over there right now and buy one.
6 days left.
And Caleb, thanks for jumping on the show when
Absolutely.
Originally this was a cancel. We kind of put this together at the last minute, and this was a really fun one. So Laurie, tell us one more time, man, we love The Path of the Pale Rider. Tell us real quick about who will love this book and why they should jump on immediately.
Yeah. So Path of the Pale Rider is a Western apocalypse series where death has been broken. So your body can die, but your soul or your energy, it doesn't leave your body upon death. So you get to hang out and experience your own decay phase. So people go through memory loss and violence and detachment and chaos. Death is broken for not just people, but for animals, insects, fish, and anything, everything. Death is missing. We started the series.
It's a comedy. This is a comedy.
Right. You're like, mine's like kind of dark, but not really. I'm like, mine is super dark.
It's a little dark.
We have comedy in it. There's funny stuff, and we have Easter eggs. And I'll tell you what, if you go look through some of the stuff that Marco DeFillo puts in the background of some of our issues, it's freaking funny. Like he puts singing bass on the walls and like toilets and trees. So you'll see like our sense of humor still come out in the series. And there's funny parts too. But so 10 years into the apocalypse is where we started in issue 1. Issue 2, we got to see more of like the terrible place that this has become and like how the people are to each other. And now in issue 3, we're actually time jumping back to the beginning of the apocalypse. So day 1 when death went missing, and we get to follow Jude St. Clair through this journey. And he's kind of like the last guy still looking for the answer to the question, why do the dead no longer die? You know what I mean? Because like 10 years into any kind of emergency. Look at the pandemic. 3 years and we're done, right? We're over it. We don't want to talk about it. We've moved on.
Yeah.
So this is 10 years, and he's like the last guy still looking for the answer to what happened. So the book is super interactive. We have riddles on the back of every single cover. So issue 1, issue 2 have riddles to solve. This one's in sign language, so you have to translate the riddle first, and then you have to send me the answer. This one triggers interaction with a character, which is really cool. So you get something mailed to you. And if you're in the continental United States, you'll get something show up in your mailbox from a character. And we also do the fan interactive short films. So if you want to become a part of the world and explore and go down that rabbit hole, we have that option for you too. Everyone's a little different. The first one we did was a commercial. The second one we did was a news report, asking people their theory about what broke death. The one I'm working on right now is actually a horror. It's a psychological horror, and I'm almost done with it. I'm so close. Can't wait to be done. But yeah, we got lots of really fun stuff. We got hot sauce. We got metal covers. We got cool t-shirts. We got Funko Pops. This one, Tim, there's only one left of the bear. So this campaign, we were doing 5 of the Big James Undead Bear Funko Pops. There's only one left.
What a great seller. Great seller. So, Funko Pops, man, can't go wrong with Funko Pops.
It's just a lot of fun. So go check out, see what works for you. We got ketchup tears and all that stuff. So if you like Book of Eli and Fallout and what else?
Nice.
Mad Max, spaghetti westerns, we kind of shove it all in there. And it works.
And I will just point out for the viewers, that's got tons of cool interactive things. Go and take a look. That's Path of the Pale Rider. Man, I just wish you every success with that campaign, Laurie. That's a terrific one. I think that's a project with got some long legs. So we'll jump over to my quick plug. Hey, I got this new book. It's over on Kickstarter right now. That's The Call of the Cryptid. It is a cryptid-based visual sci-fi adventure with an Asian American teen protagonist. If you like cryptids, UFOs, aliens, and heavy metal, this is the book for you. I promise this will be the most beautiful book you will see this year. That's designed by my pal, Erwin Arosa, and the whole thing has sort of like an eerie, dreamlike quality to it. And we got tons of cool tiers, too. There's a black and white issue that's designed to emulate the Marvel books of the 70s, if you like things like creepy and eerie and Vampirella, that kind of thing. We have a drawn in tier where this time not only are you drawn in, but you'll have lines and you'll be a critical part of the plot. You'd like to be in that one. That's kind of a cool one. And also, as most of you guys already know, I'm sure this is general knowledge, that cryptids are not actually from planet Earth, but from adjacent dimensions. So there will be included with this a chrome enhanced map of the cosmos showing the adjoining dimensions for the cryptids. It's really cool.
That's the coolest stuff.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of chrome. We're doing a lot of chrome this year.
It's like Batman's his belt where Joker's like, where does he get such fantastic toys?
I gotta show Laurie. I showed this to Carissa earlier today because we started doing one of the things is you can get it's a laser engraved wood carving. The covers, they're super cool. And the guy also hooked me up to, that's courtesy of Nerdables, by the way, check them out. Nerdables. And they also do this, it's a coin emblazoned with one side of it is Bigfoot being beamed aboard the UFO, and then the other side is the alien head. It's really sick.
So cool.
So yeah, we're figuring out all the angles. But at the end of the day, man, we got a cheap digital tier. I think it starts at $7, and you can even get all my books digitally for something like $15. And if we keep pushing forward, we're going to have an all new theme song, which it seems like the backers kind of like the theme songs. But I don't know if maybe I overshot it. That was $5,200, so I don't know if I'll get there. It's it's a guessing game.
I feel you, man. There's always this one stretch goal I set where I'm gonna just sledgehammer a watermelon dressed up as Pikachu or something ridiculous, right? And we always get just this close to it. I'm like, come on, it's gotta be Pikachu and smash some things.
Gotcha. And to you guys, man, I want to say thanks so much for coming on the Creative Cranium. I always have a great time talking to the other creators and to learn about who they do stuff. And I really enjoyed hearing about your inspirations.
Thank you.
Is there any last plugs you want to send out to the internet world before we say goodbye?
You can also find me on Tuesday mornings with Tuesday Morning Brew here on the Madness channel. I host interviews as well. I talk to other like-minded creators in a 2-hour show where they get to show off what they're working about, and I ask them real interesting questions like Coke or Pepsi. No, but we have a good time, and so you can find me there at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday.
Nice.
All right, super. Well, thanks so much for coming, everybody, and we will see you next Thursday on the Creative Cranium. Take care now.
Awesome.
I put my hand over here.